I have thought long and hard about this video for uh, a year, 2 years, maybe. I don't even know how long it's been. But I have agonized over what I wanted to say in this video because there are things about myself that I've kept private because either I was still processing it, I was still dealing with it, because I knew that this would be a thing that I would be talking about eventually, but I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to say. I'm going to talk about some things in this video that are bad. They're bad things. I've spoken publicly about a lot of the abuse that I've been through, and I have not spoken publicly about a lot of the abuse that I've been through. And it's all just been personal stuff where I didn't think I was brave enough before, I guess. But through coming out and seeing what an impact I've made on other people is that even English? People come up to me and they say, thank you for being honest and sharing parts of yourself with us because I can relate to it, or I can, my brother or my sister or a friend or a family member or something has gone through something that you've gone through, and it helps to feel like I'm not alone. And that's really affected me. I've talked in a lot of videos about how people consuming my content and speaking to me about it has made me a better person. I'm going to talk about periods in my life in this video where I was not brave, where I didn't stand up for what's right. And this, I took down notes so I could remember everything. And it's dredged up a lot of bad memories. Obviously, there's trauma associated with being abused, and it's worth it, I guess. Just because I don't talk about something that happened doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I thought that if I don't talk about it, then I could just ignore it, and that's kind of what I've done the past, couple years. And I'm going to get into that later in the video. But people have asked me how to deal with PTSD, how to deal with getting out of abuse. What do you do afterwards? There's all this, like, this is supposed to be the easy part. Like, now you're done. You're away from this person. You can live your life, but it's not that easy, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the trauma and the shit, it stays with you. And people ask me, how do you deal with that? And I'd like to help people by talking about my shit. And it would, I didn't talk about it before because I don't like people to feel bad for me. But if this can help people, if this can help even one person feel less alone, then I have the courage to do so. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't before, but now, I'm going to talk about some things that are difficult, and I hope that it helps you in some way. This is kind of like talking to the police after something has happened, where you're trying to retell events that have happened so they can make their report, and you're just remembering this shit and it's bad. But nowadays, I'm a lot more confident than I was before, and I've healed from a lot of shit, but there's still shit rolling around in this brain that is no good. But I've gotten to a point in my life where I think that I can talk about this stuff, and it doesn't affect me as deeply as it did before. And I want to show you that it does get better. So hopefully, I start a lot of videos not knowing what the point of them is, but for this I have a very clear thing in mind, and I hope it is to show you that no matter what you've gone through, it will get better. It's gonna suck for a while, but it gets better. It honestly does. And the only thing that can really heal that is time and work that you put into healing. I don't want to just give you advice and then you be like, what have you been through? How can you know what I'm feeling? Because not everyone experiences the same abuse, but that is fair. I should tell you about some of the things that I've gone through in order for you to understand that I do know where you're coming from. So this video is going to be separated into two parts, I suppose. So the first half is going to be me talking about my own experiences. And then the second half is going to be the aftermath and the healing process and what that's been like for me. And I'm sorry, this won't be a very upbeat video. I'm not doing a cold open or anything. I feel like it's just the nature of the seriousness of what I'm going to be speaking about. I just want you to absorb it in the most serious yet conversational way that I can give it to you. I met my abuser when I was 16 years old. We met on the internet because, of course, I just started voice acting, and he contacted me through Skype. We were in a big call with a bunch of other parody makers, and he asked me if I wanted to make a Pokemon parody with him and another guy named Jerry. Looking back now, all of the red flags are just very clear in my head, that I should have seen something, but I was a kid. You know, I didn't know any better, but he became my best friend, and it changed my life. Writing with him was extremely difficult, even though there was another person in the room with me. If he didn't get what he wanted, he would scream and cry, and we wouldn't move until he got his way. We tried to write with other people, and there's lots of people, like actually all of them, I'm pretty sure, if we've written with someone else, that came to me afterwards and were like, I will never write with Mike again. He is unbearable. And I don't like saying his name because part of the healing process was making friends with other people with his name. And it's a difficult thing. So I'm just going to say my abuser from this point onward, unless it like slips out, but I don't want to repeat that. I'm still, I'm healed from a lot of things, but I'm not healed from that yet. We had to fight so hard to get anything funny in scripts, and that was the fun part. The fun part was supposed to be making this fun little cartoon, you know? It's not supposed to be stressful, but I didn't look forward to scripting after a while because it was just so stressful. I'm going to go into some of my own abuse, but before I do that, he was also extremely abusive to another person, but this video is not about them. I want to focus on my shit because I did speak a little publicly, mentioning this other person in some tweets later in the story. That I'm skipping ahead a lot, but I want to get it out of the way because I want to make sure that I'm not telling someone else's story. I'm only going to be talking about my own shit, but I did publicly talk about someone else's shit a little bit by grouping them into the same group as me. But if they don't want to talk about stuff, and they don't, they've chosen to retract from the spotlight a bit and just keep to themselves, and that's completely their choice. But I did speak about it publicly a little bit and realized afterwards, like, oh shit, that's a no good. So I went to them and I apologized and was like, hey, I shouldn't have spoken about you without your permission first, and I apologized, and they forgave me, and that's good. But I want to make sure that I'm not further aggravating the issue by saying things that they might not be comfortable with, you know. So I'm just going to be talking about my own stuff. I'm very ashamed of myself looking back, though, because one of the things that my abuser was very good at was making us fight with each other, me and this other person that I was talking about before. He was abusive towards me and this other person, and he was very good at like pitting us together to like fight. He would like talk to me about this other person, be like, oh, aren't they stupid? Aren't they lazy? Aren't they, all these adjectives? And I was a shithead back then, and I kind of like, I thought he was my best friend, and I played into all the shit, and I began to have this vision of this other person that my abuser was putting into my head, this like caricature that like didn't actually exist. And he got me to join in on bullying him, and it fucking sucks. And I'm very ashamed of myself now, and I've, I don't like the person that I was back then, and I don't recognize it as myself. But that's good, I guess. That's character development, that I don't want to be this other person. But let's get back to the subject at hand. I didn't even realize the mean, horrible things that my abuser was saying were getting to me until someone else, was like, hey, that's kind of mean. Like, why are you being mean to this person? That kind of sucks. And I hadn't thought about it, but that was one of the eye-opening things for me that made me realize, oh shit, this person might not have my best interests at heart. My abuser is super, super insecure. He was just mean to everyone. And that was kind of a common thread that I realized later, is that all of his jokes, all of his everything was meant to make him look good, because he was pointing at someone else and being like, this person sucks. Let's pay attention to how much this person sucks. He was just mean to everyone, including like friends and everyone. He called people fat. He called people ugly. He just like went into like these terrible, terrible things. And then if anyone said anything bad about him, he immediately was like super, super upset. He would either get extremely angry and scream and cry, or he would like talk to the person and be like, hey, I don't like that thing you said about me, which is extremely hypocritical because he was saying awful things about that person just a second ago. And it was just a weird, bad situation. All of the traits that I'm going to talk about him having, you might be going through the same thing. And I'm here to tell you, don't make excuses for that person. If they suck, they suck. So much of my life was spent making excuses for him and begging people to like him. I would invite him to friend gatherings because no one would invite him otherwise. And I will go into that at a later point. But like, because he also like said shit about me to me and beat my self-esteem down to a point where I thought that I needed him. He created this. Well, I thought that I needed him. I tried to leave him many times. I tried to not be his friend so many times, and he would scream and cry until I stayed. And so I did. And it's a super fucked up situation thinking about it now. I tried to kill myself twice to get away from him. And also because of some other things that I will talk about later in the story. But I felt like there was no way out because there wasn't, like I wanted to leave and I tried to leave so many times and he wouldn't let me. There were so many things where he would scream and cry, or then he would talk about how our finances are tied together. He's like, you can't leave. We make this parody together, like the Patreon, you won't be able to survive without this. And so I stayed and I was fucking miserable. It got to the point where he basically controlled my entire life. He controlled and the thing that I didn't understand is because he didn't say you can't eat this food or you can't go to this restaurant, but through his actions he controlled my actions. So if someone was like, hey, he's controlling you, I would say, no, he's not, everything's fine. But he was, just because he wasn't being blatant with it doesn't mean it wasn't happening. He had a very particular food everything. So like I couldn't go to like McDonald's or something because there was nothing for him to eat, and he was like, no, we're going to eat at this place. And so it kind of acted through that. I used to be a very independent person as a kid. When I was 15 or 16, it slowed to a roll because that was during the friendship, and he was just fucking with me so much that I didn't think I could stand on my own 2 feet. I had a car, and it got to the point where I couldn't drive it anymore because I was so scared. When I would drive us places, I liked to listen to music, and he didn't want me to listen to music because he didn't like my music. And I had a lot of anxiety back then, and I had a lot of dysphoria that I didn't know was dysphoria. So the music would calm me down. So I just had to sit in this quiet car with him, talking my ear off about whatever. And if we got close to any other car on the road, he would just scream and just like the worst road rage you can think of, to the point where I was too scared to drive. So I had him drive, and then I felt like I couldn't drive anywhere because I couldn't. So he would drive us everywhere, but he would still have the same road rage. So that's one of the things that I'll get into later. But afterwards, I'm so scared to be in cars with people, or I used to be at least. Now I'm a lot better. But afterwards, I was so scared that he was just gonna scream, because any car that got close to us, he would just lose his fucking mind. And he was so loud, and it was so scary all the time. And he made everyone else in the car uncomfortable too if there was anyone else in the car with us, because he would also constantly be on his phone while he was driving, or he had one of those things that you put on the car so you can like put your phone up there, but he was like playing Pokemon Go or looking through Instagram or something while he was driving. And I was terrified all the fucking time because he also not a great driver, but people in the back would be like, hey, can you not be on your phone while you're driving us places? And he would just laugh and then just keep doing it. And no one wanted to be in a fucking car with him because of it. And that's also a big thing about him, is he didn't understand consent in any possible way, in a sexual way, in an emotional way, in a platonic, all of the different ways that you can experience consent. He just didn't have a concept of it. Or rather, he understood consent when it applied to him. which is the kicker. He knows better. It didn't apply to other people. If you were doing something and he was like, hey, stop, and you stopped, cool, great. If he was doing something to you and you said stop, he just wouldn't. He would play it off like it was a joke or something, which was very uncomfortable for everyone involved. He used to say that his favorite swear word was the C word, but it was actually the N word, which is neither of those are things that should be coming out of a white dude's mouth. Let me tell you. But he said the C word all the goddamn time. And he said the N word so fucking much. And it made me so uncomfortable. And I begged him to fucking stop and he wouldn't. Like he liked the shock value of it. But the thing is, no one was laughing with him. Everyone was laughing at him that he would say it to. And people would come to me afterwards and be like, I don't want to hang out with Mike anymore. Like, he's fucking awful. Back then, I didn't comprehend it. I just kept defending him to everyone. I wanted him to be the person that I thought he was. And that didn't coincide with that. So it was like, well, that must not be an issue. Because it doesn't coincide. I want Mike to be this cool person, this good person that people like. And yet he acts like this and it didn't coincide. So I was like, oh, it's fine. No worries. And I just kind of blocked it out. And that was, it's so silly thinking back on it, because like all of these things are so bad. And I wasn't brave. I didn't stand up for anything in my life. And that was the big issue with it. He controlled my relationships with everyone, platonic, sexual, romantic, every single relationship that I could have with other people, it made him insecure. Every single relationship that I've been in since I was 21 years old, he has sabotaged in some way, whether it's him shit-talking my significant other to me in private or just fucking with them in a way, but it's really fucked up. I would break up with people because it was too much stress because my abuser was stressed out because I was with them or I was hanging out with them or whatever. If I went out and hung out with friends, my abuser would text me and call me all night and ask when I'm coming home. And it got to the point where I was just so stressed out about that I just stopped leaving the house. I was living in a studio apartment by myself and I brought a girl home and he was just texting me and I didn't respond. So he drove his grandmother's car over to my house and was just ringing my doorbell over and over until I went to answer it. And I went out and he confronted me about it and he knew that I had a girl over. And this should be none of his business. But I had a girl over and I told him and he hit me and he drove back home and he tweeted that Pokemon Bridged was over because we weren't friends anymore. And the thing is, he hit me on video camera. Like, my landlord has a video camera there, and he realized that afterwards and begged me not to get the footage from it, and I didn't. And I regret it every day of my life. Like, here was some proof that I could help. I could get a restraining order. I could get away from him, and I didn't because he just had such a control over me that it fucking sucks. I had sex with a girl at a convention and we were talking on the phone and he just kept asking me if I'd hooked up with anyone. And eventually I was like, yes, I did. And he just started crying on the phone and what a bad situation. I'm sorry if the background is a little different now, whether it's my bed or whatever. I had to stop filming for a day because it was intense. This recording this is an intense experience, trying, like, remembering all this shit that I had put behind me, because it never really leaves you. I'm confident and happy now in my life, but it never really goes away completely. It's still a part of myself, and we shouldn't ignore that. I think the experiences that we have make us who we are. And if you're going through shit, that's fine. If you need to take a break or you're not able to talk about something, then that's completely fine. Don't be embarrassed to be like, hey, this sucks. I don't think I can do this right now. And take a breather. I took a day and chilled out, and now I'm able to talk again. So let's continue. And just a note, in case it wasn't clear, everything that I've talked about so far is pre-transition. My abuser and I dated when I was 19, and that was during the period where I realized, oh, I'm not attracted to men, or, I thought that I wasn't attracted to men because I was in the wrong body, and I wasn't attracted to men then. Since transitioning, I have realized, I'm not attracted to dudes, and assigned male at birth people. But back then, I didn't know that, and I just wasn't attracted to men. And so I broke up with him because I was identifying as a lesbian back then. And unfortunately, he never got over it. It was one of those things that everyone told me, everyone warned me that he was obsessive over me, and it was unhealthy, and I didn't listen. I was very trusting of people back then, and he just kept saying that he wasn't, attracted to me anymore. He wasn't obsessed with me anymore, and I just believed him because I did. It sucks because looking back on stuff, like, I just wish that I knew now what I did when I was a teenager, because we're dumb as teenagers, and people can manipulate us and take advantage of us, and we just don't have enough life experience to understand that some people want to hurt us and some people don't have our best interests at heart. But back then I thought that everyone wanted to help me, everyone wanted to do what was good for me, and that just wasn't the case, unfortunately. Because we were making this show together, after we broke up, we were living in the same city, we were still best friends, and we never got space between us to stop the unhealthy shit. Friends would pull me aside after hanging out with us both in the same room and be like, this dude is obsessed with you and this is unhealthy. I don't want to tell you how to live your life, but I also wouldn't be a good friend if I just let this happen. You're clearly unhappy around him. And because I didn't realize that, like, I shrunk when I was around him. I didn't have good self-esteem because he pushed these beliefs in my head every instance that he could, and I felt like I needed him. I needed this person in my life. I had blinders on, and I wanted him to be the person that I thought he was, and he just wasn't. But because he was obsessed with me being with anyone else, he just couldn't handle it. He needed to be the person in my life. There are also just little things about his personality that I should have picked up on, like weird things, like he's very spiteful. He will just do things out of spite a lot, just because he knows that it will hurt you. I was a guest at a convention that was in the area of a mutual friend of ours, so my abuser convinced me to make him my +1, and so we went to the con together, and I was like, hey, I'm a guest here. I'm going to be doing guest stuff. I'm not going to be around a lot. Are you going to be able to entertain yourself? And he said, yeah, sure. So we went there, and I went out with some friends because it was one friend's birthday. Another was getting divorced. And so we were trying to I needed to be there for my bros, So we went out and I love how it's so weird. Even just now, I was like making an excuse for myself. I don't need an excuse to go hang out with friends on their birthday, but it created this need where I was apologizing for everything. I was apologizing for existing. And I was out, and he was just texting me all night and was like, when are you coming back? Come back now. I'm bored. Come back. And I think at that point, it had only been like 40 minutes since I was out. And before I had left, we were watching one of my favorite movies. And it was like this cool experience where I was like, please watch this film with me. It would mean a lot to me. And we got through half of it, and then I had to go out. And because I wouldn't come back, he watched the rest of the movie without me. Like, I don't know. He knew what a big deal it was to me, and yet he did it just to hurt me, which is so weird. It's just a weird thing to do. But because he knew that it would hurt me, he did it. And there are lots of different instances of this spiteful behavior that I'm realizing now, looking back. But that's just it's a weird thing. And it's all these little weird things and all the big things just stacked up until there was more and more and more. Most convention experiences were like that. By the Sunday, any con that we were at together, Sunday was the day where I was just a crying mess because I would go out on Fridays or Saturdays and he would constantly be texting and calling and being like, when are you coming back? Because he didn't like parties. He didn't like going out to hang out with people in an environment that was like bars or parties, you know. So I would go out, he'd constantly be like, when are you coming back? And then I'd get back and he would just scream at me. He would just scream and cry and be like, you're not my friend. You know, you went out without me. Just really, really horrible shit. So by the Sunday, I was like, I don't want to do any panels. Like I'm so miserable. And he would just get in my face and be like, we came to this convention. You have to do the panels. It was awful. At a certain point, I kept being like, I never want to do a convention with you again. They're always a terrible experience for me. And then he would like apologize and be like, okay, it's not going to happen again. You know, it'll be fine. I'll find a way to entertain myself. And then the next convention, the same thing would just happen over and over again. He would say a lot of incel-y things, a lot of like men's rights activists, like weird shit. But he also said some progressive things. So it was never to the point where like, I was an idiot. I should have, but I should have thought that something was wrong. But it never got to the point where I was like, well, maybe like something's wrong. You know, because I was kind of a shithead back then, and I had bad opinions about women, and a lot of it was just from being surrounded by this person. And God, he has bad opinions about women. Let me fucking tell you. I wasn't convinced that he was a bad person. I was like, maybe he's just ignorant. Maybe he just needs some guidance. But no, he never changed. He never changed. Even when you told him how important something was to you, he just stayed the same. He's very sociopathic, and that's one of his biggest issues. He doesn't understand actual empathy. He can't feel it for people. If it's not something that he can relate to, it just goes right over his head, and which is why he was very set in his ways and very like, oh, this doesn't coincide with my thing, so I don't understand, you know, and it just, he didn't have true compassion for people. He would just say disgusting fucking things about women, just the worst, gross fucking things. And back then I was kind of a fuck off. I was a fuck boy. I talked in a certain way. I was never the level that he is, nowhere near it. But, you know, I thought it was just dude talk, and we were just like, you know, hashing it out like one of the guys. But it's bad. And I think about it now, and it's so gross. He'd say very bad things about their bodies, and like if they were like 1 pound over this, he was like, I'm not attracted to them anymore. And it was really, I can't even go into some of the stuff. I'm assigned female at birth. I should understand that stuff isn't acceptable. But like, even when I did understand something was unacceptable, and I was like, hey, can you not say that? That's disgusting. He would just laugh it off and be like, it's just preference or like something. And I gave him a pass because I was awful too. There's an incident that happens where I can't even talk about it because I'm basically under an NDA, but you can, I can't say anything. He has a very serious sex addiction, and it basically controls his whole life. He needs sexual contact at all times or he loses his fucking mind. He will do anything to get it. Like, he's desperate, and as someone who dated him, it was awful. I felt disgusting all the time. Like I was just a piece of meat or something. I'm not sure about the legality of me saying something like this on video. So let me just preface this by saying, oh, this is a story. This didn't happen. Him and I would drive around going to strip clubs and finding like the seediest ones that would be able to like jerk him off in the back. And this one time, one of the first times, I was like, hey, don't leave me out here. This is a strip club. I feel very uncomfortable because this is pre-transition, and you have to pay extra if you want to like watch. But I don't want to watch. I just didn't want to be left alone. And he was like, don't worry, it's fine. And I was like, I'm going to get assaulted. Like, there's really shitty dudes out here and I'm all alone. And he was like, you're not going to get assaulted. Guess who got assaulted in a strip club? I don't want to talk about it, but it was real bad. Well, it's a bad story that turns into a good story. But still, I was rescued by a stripper, which is cool, but also I don't want to talk about it. I tried to kill myself twice to get away from him, and I tried to leave him so many times, but I think I said this before, where he would just scream and cry, and so I was like, okay, I won't go. And I felt like death was really the only way to really escape him. I've made this very dark joke before, but I've had to develop a dark sense of humor to just deal with my life in the... Did that sound like Borat? My life. Jesse, don't make jokes during this. But God, what was I even saying? Borat just derailed just this whole fucking thought. Oh, I have a dark sense of humor. Okay. But I'm glad that if I'm bad at something, at least it's killing myself. At least I just suck at killing myself, apparently, because neither one took. I'm fortunate about that, but I felt like there was no real getting out of it unless that was it. You can tell that I have a dark sense of humor because I just made a weird Borat joke during this video about how to get over trauma. He basically walked me through how he stalks girls on the internet. He was like, okay, this is their Instagram. You can see who sees your story by going to this thing, and just like went into detail about it. And I'm just so grossed out and ashamed of myself that I could be friends with this person for so long. Looking back, I gave him so many passes over and over. I was so desperate for people to like him because he was so aggressively unlikable. For so long, I wasn't brave enough to like tell someone or do something about it, And I'm just so grateful for the people in my life that had patience with me and forced me to grow up. I had a lot of toxic shit. I still have some toxic shit that, you have to get over in order to stand up to people like that. And my sink agrees. Hopefully that was picked up by the microphone. Otherwise, I just made a face for nothing, but there was a glug glug. But I finally had to do something because he's never going to grow up. He's not capable of it. There's something mentally wrong with him, and I kept trying to change him. For 9 years, I tried to change him to make him a decent person, and that's not my responsibility. I was doing so much emotional labor for someone who just didn't give a shit. Just the way that he views women is so fucked. He's just a stupid, gross predator piece of shit, and it took me so long to understand that behavior wasn't okay. Massage therapists and like personal trainers, people who are there to do a job, he would just sexualize, and like it's so gross. I'm so mad thinking about it. I'm so fucking mad. We had a personal trainer that was a friend of ours that would come to our house to train us, and sometimes our friends were over while this was happening, and 2 or 3 of them came to me afterwards, whether it was like in person or through text message. Some of them, because it was so awkward, like it shouldn't have been awkward, but it was. They felt awkward. They were like, hey, I don't know how to say this, but Mike was staring at her breasts or her butt when she was bent over, and it was uncomfortable. Like, clearly I thought maybe he wasn't at first, but then I kept watching and it clearly was. This is a weird, gross thing, and I just wanted to make you aware of it. And I felt awkward also, so I didn't want to say anything. Like, how am I supposed to say something? But I should have said something. There's no excuse for it. I should have done something. But in my head, he was still savable, and I was trying to save him, and that fucking sucks. I said this in the previous PinkBlue episode, but I said that, these videos would have a lot of overlapping things, and you could like put together a timeline through it. But now I'm going to talk about coming out. When I realized that I was trans, this was years ago, and I came out to him and was like, hey, I think I might be trans. And he convinced me to stay in the closet because he said the world wasn't ready for trans people. When in reality now, I know that he was just obsessed with me. And if I was a boy, then that would make him, pan or gay or whatever. And he couldn't handle that. So there must be something wrong with me. For perspective, let me just give you these 2 perspectives. This is how he handled it. And this is how another friend of mine handled it. He, this friend, I won't name him just for like privacy's sake. I didn't get it approved by him. So I'm just going to just to be safe. But he realized that he was into non-binary people and was just like, he had identified as a straight dude for so long, but then was just like, huh, I guess I'm like pan or something. I guess I'm queer. That was it. Then he just like moved on and accepted himself and accepted this like part of himself, and like he's like a great fucking dude. And that's the way you fucking handle it. You don't say, oh, this person must be a girl or a dude or something binary so that like something isn't wrong with me. It's something wrong with them, you know? But yeah, fuck. But he was too insecure, so something must be wrong with someone else. I remember I was so miserable, and we were just like in his room, and I was crying and begging him to let me go on T. I was like, please, you know, like, fuck, I'm so miserable. And he wouldn't let me. And that's not something that someone else can let you do, but he had such a hold on me at that point. You know, this was 8 or 9 years into the friendship at that point, and I gave up. I gave up on everything. I gave up on life, and I was going to kill myself for the third and final time. I was going to make it stick this time, because there are times that charm, I don't know if that's too dark. I'm sorry. You gotta make jokes about things sometimes. Well, at least the person that it happened to, they can make jokes about it. But it helps you cope. But yeah, you know the other parts of the story because you've seen the episode. But I'm gonna kill myself. Sam invites me to do D&D. I do that. I meet Dash. We start dating. Did I tell the part about the car? I think I did. I told the thing about the car where yes, I did. So Dash drives me back to Staten Island that night, and I feel shitty because I'm making them drive me all the way home. And it's really late at that point. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and they're like, hey, can I sleep over? Because I'm falling asleep at the wheel. I don't know if I can drive back to Brooklyn. And I'm terrified instantly because I'm like, oh shit, my abuser is not going to be happy with that. He's going to make them sleep on the couch or something. And I tell them this, and they're like, do you want me to sleep on the couch, or do you want me to sleep in your room with you? And I said, in my room. You know, obviously I don't want you to sleep on the couch. I want you to sleep in my bed with me. And they were like, well, then we'll do that. You know, Dash is one of my favorite people. They saved my life. Like D&D saved my life, and then Dash saved my life over and over. I will always be ashamed of how shitty I treated them when I first got out of my shit, which I'll get into later. But they have this confidence that they really helped me gain my confidence with. So we got there, and they are not intimidated at all by my abuser. You know, I'm very intimidated by my abuser, and they aren't. And we get there, and he's just like, oh, so Dash is gonna sleep on the couch? And then Dash like no sold him, just like stared him right at him and was like, no, I'm gonna sleep in Jesse's room if Jesse wants that. And they looked at me, and I was like, yeah. And this was like, oh, this is one of the first times that someone has like told him no. And my heart stopped. I was like, oh my God, you can just say no to him? That's crazy. This began a long chain of events where I kept trying to make them be friends. And I'm really ashamed of that too, because my abuser is such a piece of shit, and Dash did not deserve me trying to force them to be friends. My abuser was forcing me to get a flu shot, and I didn't want to get a flu shot. And Dash had to sit there for like 3 hours trying to make him understand that you can't just force someone to get a shot. Because this was also the person that said that I couldn't go on T. You know, like, you're controlling what's going in my body. They would have argument after argument of like Dash trying to convince him to be a good person, and they would last hours, and Dash would like lose work and sleep and money because they were staying up so late that they couldn't go to work the next day. And I just feel so shitty. But I remember we were sitting in this restaurant one night, and I was like, I'm really sorry. You know, he's a good guy. You just gotta give him another chance. And I will never forget it because Dash looked at me and said something to the effect of, I care about you so much. I will keep doing this until I die. Or I will, you know, I will keep doing this until it kills me. And that gave me they were basically giving me the power, you know, of being like, you decide when this stops. When are you going to give up on this guy? And it took me way longer than it should have. The closer that I got to Dash, the more insecure my abuser got. And all of these late night conversations, by the end, my abuser was like, you know what? I see your perspective, which is why I thought that he was changeable. You know, that like maybe he's not a huge piece of shit. Maybe he understands empathy a little. He understands other people's perspectives. You just got to try hard enough. But then eventually, near the end, he was like, yeah, guess what? I was lying the whole time. I never agreed with you even once of all those arguments. Wanted you to shut up. And if he's lying about that, what else is he lying about? That was the first final straw. Like that was the package deal of that final straw. And also the other final straw was that him and Dash were talking about how I tried to kill myself. And my abuser said that it didn't really count. Because if I wanted to kill myself, I would have succeeded. I would have done it. And that was it for me. It made me realize that this is not a good person. This is a truly evil person. So he came to pick me up from Dash's place. We were going from Brooklyn back to Staten Island, and we were in the car and he was driving, and I said, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. I'm going to go pack my stuff and I'm moving out. And he was deathly quiet for like 5 or 6 minutes. And I thought he was going to hit me. You know, it was that level of quiet where I was like, he's never been this quiet before. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think I'm going to die here. And then eventually he said, that's not fair. And I just didn't know what to do. So I said, I've made up my mind. And then we were on the highway and he started screaming and crying and driving. I don't know how fast we were going, maybe 90, maybe 95 miles an hour. It was really fast. It was too fast. And he was just screaming and being like, just anything that he could say, anything that could come out of his mouth was just coming out of his mouth. He screamed that I was his best friend, that he was nothing without me. And I just stayed quiet because there was nothing I could say to make him stop. And I didn't want to say anything, you know, I'd made up my mind and that was it. And we were going so fast and he was driving so erratically that I had accepted death. Like I was like, this is it. There's so many stories of, you know, cis white dudes becoming obsessed with like queer people of some kind or ex-partners. And then they both die, you know, like he kills them in some way. And every pole that we passed, I was like, this is going to be it. He's going to drive us into a pole and kill us both. And that's going to be the end of my story. We're just going to be a Kotaku fucking article, you know? Creators of Pokemon Bridge die in weird situation. Uncomfortable situation. But what finally got me to say something was he'd screamed and cried and was just, you know, like swerving. And then he was like, this is all Dash's fault. And then that got me to snap because I was like, that was it. And I started screaming at him and I was like, how fucking dare you? Dash is the only person who still was giving you a shot. And immediately my abuser shrunk down and was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. And I was like, no, fuck you. You suck so much. You are such a bad person. And I just let him have it. I just like, everything that I had wanted to say to him came out in that instance. And I was like, you have abused me so badly that I tried to kill myself twice. You have destroyed every romantic, sexual, and platonic relationship that I've been in the last 9 years. You control every aspect of my life. You are a terrible person. And I tried to get out of the car because we had like gotten to a red light. And he was like, don't get out of the car, don't get out of the car. And I was like, fuck you. And he said, okay, if you stay in the car, we will go to the house and I will leave. And I shut the door and I sat there and we drove home. And on the way I texted Dash and was like, hey, weird question. Would you be able to come to Staten Island? And I never said I'm afraid he's going to hurt me because I didn't want to say that out loud. I didn't want to assume something that might not be the case. But I was thinking it, you know, because all of these actions display a crazy person. And here was this man that I thought I knew for years and years. I'd known him for 8-9 years at that point, and I thought I knew him. And yet he was acting, he'd always been abusive, but it got more intense the older that he got and the closer that we got. So here was this man that I thought I knew, and he was acting so outrageously that I knew he had become unpredictable. I didn't know if he'd always been this way and I just unlocked a potential in him where he just goes insane. It's like a pet that gets rabies, but I couldn't treat him like this thing that I had known. I know how this animal acts, I know how the character traits that this thing has. This is an entirely different thing. This has evolved to the point where I don't know what the fuck is happening, and I don't know what the fuck is going to happen. And I was just scared. I was so scared. And Dash could tell. So even though I didn't say I'm in immediate danger, because I didn't know if I was, so I didn't want to say that just in case. But once I explained what had happened, Dash was like, I'm on my way, because that's extremely scary. Because I have never stood up to him in that way. I don't know if he was going to leave and then come back with a gun. I had no idea, because this was a part of my abuser that I had never seen before. Something, the math of like me standing up to him plus him shrinking down. What does that mean? What does this equal? Is he going to kill me or not? So we got home. My abuser packed a bag. He went to his grandma's house. And Dash came to Staten Island, and we just kind of existed in the house for a couple days while we decided what was going to happen. Was I going to, they offered to let me go live with them in Brooklyn. Thank God, because that was one of the things stopping me, was like my abuser had been very like insistent on, you can't survive without me. You can't survive without this Pokemon parody that we're making, because you don't have the money. But the rent was very cheap in Brooklyn. So even though we were only dating for a month or 2 or 3 at that point, I moved in. But before he left, he said something to either me or Jerry. I forget who it was, at this point. Maybe it was both, actually. I forget. But one of us, I remember he did something to pit us against each other. That part gets a little blurry in my head because I was so full of adrenaline from, finally standing up to him in a real way, where I was like putting my foot down. This is it, But he said something. I'm sure I'll remember once I stop recording the video. But he said something to the effect of like, ask Jesse or something like that to Jerry. So Jerry came to me and was like, what? And I was like, I don't know. That was a weird thing he did. I think he just wanted us to fight. And he was like, oh, should we fight? And I was like, I don't want to. Do you want to fight? And he was like, no. I was like, okay, I guess we won't fight then. I say that within a week, I'm going to get my stuff and I'm going to move to Brooklyn. And at this point, I'm scared shitless. And I just want out of that house. I just want to get as far away from him as I possibly can. I've loaned him almost $1,000. I think it was like $800 or $900. And I don't even care at this point. I just want to get away. That's, I accept that as collateral. I'm like, this is a loss that I'm going to have to take if I want to get away from this person. And, at that point I'm done. Now here comes the thing that I've been dreading talking about, because I've been racking my brain trying to figure out how to say this. And there's no easy way to say it, so I'm just going to say it. My abuser sexually assaulted me when I was 21. I had broken up with him, and I was identifying as a lesbian at that point. I was living in the college dorms. At that point, I was going to college on Staten Island, also where he lived. We were in the common area of my dorms, and I was 21. So I had just turned 21, so I was not familiar with drinking yet. My abuser doesn't drink, but he kept pressuring me to drink. I was having fun at first, but then it got to the point where it was like this bottle of, vodka, like one of those mini bottles, like a, I forget the size, but it was not to be consumed by one person who didn't drink, and I kept saying, I want to stop. I don't like this anymore. And he said, you're almost through the bottle. Just keep drinking. I don't want to go into too much graphic detail past that point. For my own sake, I'm fine. I've talked to so many therapists about this, but it's more for if I were to talk about it, I'm afraid even people who know that this story contains sexual assault, it would be triggering for a lot of people. But the short of it is that I blacked out and he raped me. And afterwards, he was very, very quiet, and he got very scared very fast when he realized that I was conscious. And he begged me to keep quiet about it. He just got very pale, because I don't think he was expecting me to wake up. And I kept quiet about it because I didn't want to be raped. And I think a lot of sexual assault victims in general kind of take this mentality. A lot of us go into denial about it because we don't want this thing to have happened to us, but it did happen. And there's no amount of pretending that can make it not have happened to us. But I was so desperate to just be a regular fucking person that I said I wouldn't tell anyone. Do you know the musical Waitress? I mean, it was a movie before. I'm not sure if it was a book even before that, but I know it as the musical because that was the first way that I consumed it. There's a lot of shitty things in Waitress, but the music is great, and it's one of my favorite musicals, and I've seen it 3 times. In fact, I'm not sure if I've talked about Waitress in another of my videos, but in case I haven't, spoilers for Waitress, I guess. The whole plot of Waitress is that it's this woman, Jenna, who gets knocked up by her husband, Earl, who she hates, and she doesn't want the baby this whole time. She's trying to get away from Earl, and it never quite goes her way, and she just kind of gives up by the end. But then she has her baby, and she sees this life that is going to be destroyed by this abusive piece of shit, Earl. And she realizes in that instant, I'm going to leave Earl. I'm leaving him right now. Because you can hurt me all you want, but when you bring someone else into it, if my not being brave is going to start affecting someone else, then I have to do something. And that's what happened with me. I probably never would have told anyone. It would have been this secret that I would have my whole life. But as I was packing up to leave and like getting all my shit together, I realized he was hanging out with a mutual friend of ours, and there were too many similarities between me and this girl. He seemed to be getting obsessed with her the same way that he was obsessed with me. Like little details and things that I recognized as, oh no. And it was immediately, my heart sank. And I just knew he was going to start grooming this fucking girl the same way that he tried to groom me. And I couldn't let that happen. So even though it was scary, I knew that I had to talk about something. I didn't have to go public about the sexual assault. I could just, go public about what an abusive piece of shit he is. And that could be some kind of warning to someone. I needed to save her. I needed to save everyone from him. I needed to warn them what he is capable of. I was so scared for her. And I was like, what am I doing? If I leave, he's just going to attach to someone else. He's just going to ruin someone else's life. So I was packing up my stuff and I asked him, hey, can you not be in the house while I'm getting my shit together? Because I just want to get my stuff and go. And he said, okay. And then I showed up to pack up my stuff and he was there. And I was like, fucking fine. Okay. He made my life such hell the last week or 2 weeks that I was packing everything up. I asked him to leave me alone. He followed me from room to room. I was shaking with such anxiety. Even though Dash was there and could protect me, they couldn't protect me from the hold that my abuser had on me. I was like rushing to pack things up. I started packing a pan in the kitchen that I thought was mine. It turned out it wasn't. And immediately he jumped down my throat and was like, that's my pan. You taking my pan. I'm going to look it up on Amazon. And he started looking up the pan on Amazon to see how much it was, like, so that I could pay him for the pan. And I was like, fuck it, whatever. And I just left it, I almost had a panic attack just now, just remembering how awful that last 2 weeks. Jesus Christ. I was so scared. I was so fucking scared. Also, while I was packing up and trying to get out of this house, it is so stupid thinking about it. But, I was packing up and my abuser just kept talking about like how he was going to kill himself. And at that point, I just had no fucks to give. And I looked at him because like he said it like 2 or 3 times. He was like, I have nothing left to live for. I'm just going to kill myself. I don't know what's going to happen to my cat afterwards. Like just shit trying to make me feel terrible. And it wasn't going to work because I looked at him and was like, I've literally tried to kill myself twice because of your fucking abuse. If you want me to feel bad for you, if you want me to coddle you by you threatening to kill yourself, you can go fuck yourself. And he shut up after that because he knew, like, I don't, like, I think I even said, like, I don't care if you die. I almost killed I tried to die for you. I killed myself because of you, like, twice. Like, this is not, you can't, this isn't Uno where you can reverse that card back at me. I do not care about you. Why would I care about you? Like, this is, but I think he was sad and desperate. But once I said that, he shut up immediately because he realized that, I think, of what a stupid thing it is to threaten to kill yourself in front of the person who literally tried to kill themselves for you or because of you. Is there really a difference at this point? I don't know. But because we own a company together, the three of us, Jerry, my abuser, and I, we need to sit down and sign some paperwork to make sure we liquidate the assets or whatever the hell. And I'm not looking forward to that. And I'm like, okay, let's just get it over with. And we sit down to talk about what happens with the physical equipment versus the not physical equipment, as in like YouTube channels and things that we have accrued as a company. Jerry and I talk about it and we decide, okay, so, you know, my abuser, he can have his YouTube channel because we don't want it. You know, he made it before we had become a group, you know, the One Kids Entertainment channel. We don't want it. We don't want to want it, you know, like, you know, you can have this. Jerry would get the Controller Rollers YouTube channel, which was our gaming thing that we did because Jerry wanted to do like a lot of gaming stuff and that would benefit him. And, you know, I didn't want it either. So, you know, you could have that. That's cool. And I would get the Twitch channel because we had multiple different shows going. And I was like, if you wanted to split up the percentage, I was the one who was in all of the streams, basically. And I was like the prominent of the three of us. So Jerry and I agreed that that would be fair, you know, and also the Twitch channel. I had already talked about publicly, I was going to use it to do my top surgery fundraiser. We were going to do a 24-hour kind of thing, and we would host it on that Twitch channel because we had a lot of followers there. But my abuser said we needed to think about it more. And here was this guy who was making my life hell, and I just wanted to get away from him. And so Jerry and I tried explaining to him, like, hey, this, and this is fair. We don't want your, what is there to discuss? This is fair to all of us. If you know, take things out in percentages and like who would benefit from what the most. And he just kept dragging his feet. And Jerry and I were like, please, like, the company is dissolving. This is the last time, like, we're going to see each other. Can you just like not be an asshole for a second? And we could tell that like, it was just him dragging his feet. It was just him because he knew that he was never going to see me again after this conversation, and he wanted it to last as long as possible. I needed that Twitch channel for my top surgery fundraiser. It was a huge thing that we'd been planning for a really long time. This was it. What is there to discuss? But he still had power over me. This is the last little drag of power he had over me. And he knew once I walked through that door, I was never coming back. So he was going to make this last as long as possible. And he knew he could, because he, unfortunately, had the majority of the company. When we signed the papers, we split everything into percentages. And if you're starting a company with friends, make sure no one has the biggest piece of the pie. At least don't give it to the egomaniac. But we were friends when we were making the company, and I didn't think it was going to come to this. And we were like, hey, it's us against you. Come on. Can you please? And he was like, I own the majority of the company. I get the last say on this. And we argued for what felt like hours. I don't know how long it actually was. Jerry refused to take the Controller Rollers YouTube channel unless my abuser gave me the Twitch channel. Because even at this point, he was like, what is going on? You're clearly just trying to like hurt people. What are you doing? But by the end of it, I was just like, fuck it. Because it wasn't worth it. It was not worth being in the same room as this horrible shithead for another second. So I was like, whatever. You get everything. I'll sign the papers. Just let me go finish packing up my shit. And this comes back to the spiteful shit I was talking about before. He knew how important that was to me. He knew how important it was that I get the money for my top surgery. And he took it away from me because he could. And that fucking sucks. And that was one of those prominent things that made me realize this is not a person who is good. This is not a person who wants to make you feel happy or good. Every second that I was still in that room with him was painful, and Jerry could tell and was trying to convince Mike so much, and he didn't budge. He didn't move. I went to my abuser and I was like, and this was a mistake. I shouldn't have threatened him because of what he did afterwards. But I was so desperate. I was so fucking desperate for him to stop harassing me. I wanted him to leave me alone. And I knew the only thing that I could do, the only chip that I had to get him to leave me alone, was I got up to him, you know, when it was like just us in the room. I think Dash had gone to like get something or drive around because they were stressed out too, and driving helped them de-stress. And I said, stop it. Stop harassing me. Leave me alone. Or I am going to tell people that you raped me. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to tell people. I don't want them to know this thing about me. I don't want to be judged for the worst thing that ever happened to me. So I don't want to tell people. But if you don't stop and let me pack up my shit and leave so I never have to see your stupid fucking face again, I will tell that. If this gets out, it's going to ruin your life. It's going to ruin your life. Like, I'm going to ruin your life. But do you understand? I don't want to do that. It's going to affect both of us. I don't want that. And he got quiet. And he was quiet the rest of me packing up. And I left. And I went to Brooklyn. And a couple of weeks later, I got a message from a friend of mine saying that my abuser had gone to his house and told him about how he assaulted me. The world stopped, and someone else knew about this thing that I had kept a secret for so long. And I don't know if I had an anxiety attack or a panic attack, but all I know is that I started disassociating, and we were in Taco Bell. We were in a Taco Bell, and I was with, Dash, my partner, who I had been dating for months at that point, and I was so destroyed. I had to tell them that I was a victim of sexual assault, and Jesus, I didn't want to do that. There's absolutely no shame in being sexually assaulted, but I guess I'm my own worst critic. Like if someone else was sexually assaulted and they told me about it, I'm like, thank you for being so brave. That took a lot to tell me about that. And it says nothing about you as a person, you're a victim. But for some reason, because it was me, and I guess it was because this story was coming out when I wasn't ready for it, I was so panicked. If I was going to tell a partner that I was sexually assaulted, this wasn't the way that I wanted it to come out. I wanted it to be on my own terms, not because my sexual assaulter was going insane and telling people. And who else did he tell? What is going on? Up until this point, I still, for some reason, had this hope in my heart that maybe my abuser and I could still be friends. As crazy as that sounds. I still had hope that he and I could be friends after this if we just took some time and years, and maybe he'd get better or whatever. I thought Dash and the three of us could be friends one day. Just the little bit of hope. And that was gone after this because I was trying to convince Dash and my abuser to be friends. But I knew that if Dash knew my abuser assaulted me, that was it. They would never be friends with him after that once they knew. And that was it. Mental abuse is one hell of a drug, because I'm sure some of you who have never experienced it, might be thinking, why would you still want to be friends with this person? After everything that they've done, why would you still want to associate with this person at all? And I couldn't tell you. The brain is just fucked. When someone beats you down every day for 9 years, but also gives you compliments, but then beats you down again, it does something to you mentally. I became this husk of a person. I became this shell of who Jesse used to be. And I just wanted his approval and I wanted his attention because he made me think that I wanted it. It's explored in a lot of media, like the control that mental abuse does to some people. You could probably think of a movie or a TV show where someone is like severely mentally abused and then they get the chance to leave and then they don't want to. And that wasn't the case with me exactly, because I did try to leave multiple times and, he stopped me. But after a while, I got so used to it that I thought killing myself was the only way to get away, truly. So there are similarities, but there's also differences. But some characters in media, they have a chance to leave and then they just don't, because they have such a control over them that they don't think it's an actual option. And the assault was part of the reason that I tried to kill myself twice. I just felt broken and disgusting all the time, and just being near my abuser was just a reminder, of what he did. Having to live with that is just a constant reminder when you're trying to forget. I tried to repress it, and then every once in a while it would come out and I would just feel so disgusting. After an assault like that, some people can't enjoy sex the same way again. It's still something that I'm recovering from. It's been years and years and I've gotten a lot of therapy. And luckily my physical transition has helped that a lot, because I don't have that, I call it any junk, as I've said in other PinkBlue episodes, just because it's less dysphoric that way. My any junk doesn't function really anymore. It's just for peeing, basically, and I never really used it for, sex. So luckily that's not a thing I really have to worry about, but just, an assault like that is very damaging. I get scared dating, cisgender men or assigned male at birth people, because I'm afraid they're going to hurt me. And it's something that I have to slowly get used to someone being close to me. I wasn't all right with cuddling for a while. Even the act of cuddling was very triggering for me, and it made me seize up, and I would get scared or have panic attacks or something. My abuser did the two worst things that have ever happened to me: the actual sexual assault, and then also telling everyone before I was ready. One of the things sexual assault survivors have is their story. If not anything else, they have a story that is theirs, and that gives them power, that they decide when or if they will share this thing with the world, whether with friends or co-workers or anyone, really. Their story is their power. At least they have this, and that was taken from me, and that is truly unforgivable. I think there's only like one worse thing you can do besides sexually assault someone, and that is also telling everyone about it when they are not okay with it. I feel like that's one of the only worst things you can do, like to make the situation worse. And he did it. I didn't think a human could fuck up so much, but yeah, he did. I was so paranoid all the time, like who knows this thing that I've been keeping a secret for so long. I would meet new people and just be scared, like, do they know? Even to this day, I hang out with people who are in the same circles as people who knew, and I'm so paranoid hanging out with them. Everything they say to me, I'm like, do they know? Do they know? Who did they tell? What's going on? I'm getting a little breathless thinking about it. One of the things the therapist told me when I was telling them about this is, I was like, in the beginning, I was so confused and hurt, and I didn't understand why it felt so confusing. And he explained it in a good way. He said, you're right to feel that way, because it was an extreme betrayal of a person who had already betrayed you so much. And you still had this hope that they could be a good person. But this was further proof that they were just not going to change. And that's extra devastating, because just knowing that you were a fool this whole time, He didn't say a fool. That's me filling in my own words for it. I felt so stupid that I gave this person so many chances, and I had hope that maybe there was some good person under there, but there isn't. It was concrete proof that he didn't actually want to change. If he had stopped for a second, because this was a selfish, impulsive thing that, maybe in his head he thought it was better if they heard from him than from me, the victim, which is a stupid, horrible thing to think. But he's stupid and horrible, so maybe he just thought that. But he lost, obviously, a lot of people after that. And he was very, very upset because more and more people started coming to me and were like, hey, your abuser sat down with me and told me something terrible. And I am so sorry. And they told me that once my abuser told them this and they were like, I'm done with you. I don't want to associate with you anymore. You're fucking horrible. Jesus Christ. My abuser got very, very angry and started screaming and crying at them. And this is, I'm used to him screaming and crying, but this was someone who had never experienced that side of him experiencing it. And they were just like, fuck you, or like, get help. And just, that was the end of the conversation. Now, before I go further, I do want to, let people know at this time, I don't want to talk about this. I'm talking about it in a video in hopes that it can help people. If it can help you relate or feel less alone, then I want to do that. But right now I'm getting used to my new body and I'm a lot more healed than I was before. But right now I just don't really want to talk about it. If you want to tweet at me or like say something at a con or like whatever, you don't have to like go into detail. You can just, if you want, just be like, I saw episode 9, I think this is 9 and 10, maybe 9 and 10. I think I'm going to split this video up into 2 parts about trauma. But you could say, hey, I saw PinkBlue. I saw episodes 9 or 10 or whatever. Thank you for talking about it. I have an experience with assaults or something. That's totally fine. But for me, I'm not ready to talk about it. I'm talking about it now because it's a closed circuit. I'm talking to a camera right now. There isn't a person there. But I appreciate it, but I'm good. I'm processing. I'm going to therapy. I'm going to group therapy. Also, I'm dealing with it in my own way. So Dash took it very well. I mean, at least as well as someone can. I could tell that they were obviously very upset, but I think they understood that it wasn't about them. They were just trying to comfort me because this was like a very raw thing that I was telling them in a Taco Bell. I'd like to point out this was in a Taco Bell. It was horrible and traumatizing at the time, but thinking about it now, what a fucking location, huh? I have a dark sense of humor because I had to get one real fast to survive in this world. And holy shit, like just thinking about it now is funny to me. Like, of all the locations, what a weird fucking thing. And I'm glad that I have healed enough at this point that I can find humor in that. It's like going to Disney World and finding out your mom has cancer or something. So afterwards, I called my abuser and he picked up and I was like, hey, like, I didn't even know how to start the conversation. I was like, I think I just blurted it out because I didn't think this had to be said, So I was like, hey, don't tell people you sexually assaulted me. Like like in the most obvious way. Like, hey, don't tell people that. What? Or actually, what happened? I called. I was like, hey, did you tell insert name of friend here? I'm keeping him private just because, I just want to. I was like, hey, did you tell him that you sexually assaulted me? And did you like go into detail about it? Like, it was traumatizing for my friend also, because he was like, he went into some detail that I did not want to know. So I asked like, hey, did you tell him this? And my abuser was like, yes. And I was like, don't tell people that. Okay. And he was like, okay. And I was like, okay, good. And we hung up. So I got 2 more calls that night from people being like, hey, like the same thing happened, your abuser sat down with me and told me about this horrible fucking thing. I'm so sorry. They were all very sympathetic towards me, but it was like traumatizing and horrible to know that he was still out telling all of our friends and family and shit about this. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to talk about this. This is not the conversation that I wanted to be having with people. I'm already in an emotionally vulnerable state. I've kicked my abuser to the curb. I've moved out with a partner. I'm trying to not be terrified all the time. And this is not helping. And I was like, you know what? Maybe they got told before I told him to not tell people. Obviously, don't fucking tell people, Maybe this happened before. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But then calls kept happening. Like 3 days later, 5 days later, a week later, whatever. And so I began asking them, hey, when did he tell you this? And all of the dates were after I had told him not to tell people. So he just lied. He just lied and said that he wasn't going to tell anyone else, and then just kept telling people. This was unpredictable and untrustworthy and weird. The tiniest glimmer of hope that I could trust him one day was just gone. And this is part of the reason that he will never come back to the internet, is because people would bury him. He was extraordinarily cruel to people who wouldn't continue being his friend after they found out about this. Screaming, crying, calling them the worst names possible, threatening to kill himself. People told me real bad things he did. My abuser makes a Patreon post because we had an Elite 3 Patreon without Jerry or I's consent. He says Pokemon Bridged is over, Elite 3 is dissolving because Jesse and I aren't friends anymore. And everyone is very upset because a lot of people at this point know the truth without me even saying anything, because they, my abuser had gone to them, told them about this horrible shit. They know that it's not as simple as Jesse and I aren't friends anymore. And plus that completely sweeps this other person that my abuser abused. It sweeps them completely under the rug. Like, what? Just because I'm the one standing up to things doesn't mean everyone's mad. And I don't know about this Patreon post because I don't follow our own shit, which is, it's a whole other issue. But I just get spammed with this fucking thing and everyone is upset. Everyone is super mad at my abuser because of this. And rightfully so. Because this forces my hand and I'm so emotionally raw dealing with everything. I don't want to go public right now about what's happening, but my abuser is trying to change the story and this kind of forces me to say something, otherwise the story is going to get changed without my consent. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to, but I consulted a bunch of people and they agreed that I needed to say something. So I make a bunch of tweets and I don't mention the sexual assault at all because I'm not even ready to talk about the non-sexual assaults. I don't want to talk about any of this, but I have to say something. And I think it's only 8 or 9 tweets in a thread, but it was just as much as I could muster to say. And I felt so shitty, but I did. And honestly, after I said it, it made me feel a little better because for a while I was terrified because he had convinced me for so long that I needed him, that people wouldn't like me without him. But there was such an outpouring of support. Everyone hated him, it turns out, which I kind of had a feeling, but I didn't fully accept. I got so many messages from people just being like, thank God, because I've seen how he treats you, I've seen how he treats Jerry, I've seen how he treats these other people, and how he treats me. He's not a good person, and I only hung out with him because you dragged him everywhere, you were afraid to go out on your own, so you kind of brought him to events, and he sucked. Oh, this is important. Okay. One of the first people who got sat down by my abuser and my abuser told them everything. My friend was like, hey, just so you know, one of the things that he said was that, and if you said this, I don't blame you at all because he fucking deserves it. But I wanted to ask because I don't know if this is a made up thing or not. He said that you said you were going to ruin his life. And again, I don't blame you. He's a crazy person. He absolutely deserves it. But I was just wondering if that's an actual thing you said or not. And I was so fucking disturbed that that's what my abuser got out of that conversation. What is going on mentally in his head that that's what he got from that? What? You're taking something completely out of context and then I was so confused because I wasn't even going to say anything. I just said, leave me alone this last 2 hours while I pack up my shit, or I'm going to tell someone. That was it. What is going on? And I asked friends about it because I was so confused. And a lot of them were like, listen, he's got nothing on you. This is not what you want to hear, but he's scared. He's really scared because he knows that everyone hates him. He has 2 choices. He either has to lie about you, or he has to take something that you actually said and pull it out of context in order to twist it and make people feel bad for him. Because he has nothing. He has nothing. You haven't done anything, so he needs to make shit up. And I said, so wait, the choices were he either lies or he lies. And they were like, yeah. And I didn't understand that everyone hated him. I didn't get it. I didn't see it. I understood that some people hated him, but everyone really, really disliked him. I didn't realize just how horrible he was to people and around people until they told me. He was very weird to me and very aggressive towards me in front of fans and in front of friends and family. But he was also just very mean to people in general. He was that type of insecure where he would say shit like, I don't want to wear pink, or I don't want to wear floral stuff because people are going to think I'm gay and I don't want people to hit on me. And that, of course, made everyone super uncomfortable. Like, what the fuck are you even saying? No one's attracted to you because you're a huge piece of shit. Just say you're not into dudes and then that's it. Why? Guys were very uncomfortable around him, but also girls were very uncomfortable around him. They told me some really weird shit that he would like say around them or like do for them, or like, it was just uncomfortable. And that really struck a chord with me because, like, holy shit, that instantly terrified me because this was my responsibility. I was bringing him around these girls. Like, they trusted me and I brought this awful person around them. So people reached out and everyone was like very supportive and very nice towards me. But there were some people that unfortunately didn't understand the situation, which makes sense because I couldn't say everything that I wanted to online. But also, unfortunately, there are bad people out there and some people just don't get things. Either they've done bad things themselves and they wouldn't want someone to completely turn on them. So they see themselves in this abuser and they're like, oh, they didn't do anything wrong. Everything's fine. You shouldn't let internet comments or anything dictate your life. But one thing that I never do read, the garbage that was coming out of there or the garbage that comes from YouTube comments and stuff like that. I prefer Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, because there's actual things that are good and nuggets of wisdom and like actual constructive criticism that can come out of those sources. But one of the things that I did happen to read was like, someone was just like, and they were a friend of my abuser, so I knew that he was talking to him. But something that like haunted me for a long time was someone said, Jesse did bad things too. I racked my brain and I obsessed over that for days and weeks because I was like, fuck, what could I have done? What could my abuser possibly tell them that I did? And I was trying to think of things that I did wrong. Like, what could I have possibly done wrong? What did I do to deserve this? And the only things that I could possibly think of are that I had him drive me places, but that was directly caused by the abuse. My abuser made it so that I couldn't drive anymore. So, I needed him to drive me places. And I got super codependent and was like, I can't drive places without you, like maybe that could have been it. And I also physically shoved him twice. So that could have been it. The first time he said something really awful about a rape victim, and instantly that made me flare up and I just like pushed him without thinking. And then the second time I was trying to leave and he physically was getting in front of me in order to stop me from leaving the room. We were arguing about my girlfriend and he was saying that like she was no good for me. She was fine. She wasn't doing anything wrong. Now I look back on it, it's fucking stupid. But he was saying like, no one will ever love you as much as I do, and like was stopping me from leaving the room. And I pushed him because I wanted to leave the room and he was physically stopping me from leaving. But those were the only two things that I could possibly think of. But if he was twisting my words from before about ruining his life, maybe he just said Jesse was like physically abusive with me or something. I didn't give any other context, and maybe that was it. But that was all I could think of. I kept thinking and thinking and thinking, and I was like going insane, trying to think of what he could possibly have said. What did I do? What could I possibly have done? Because at this part in the story, I am still a little in denial that he can lie still. So that wasn't an option to me. There had to be something, I could have done something. Maybe I did something, but everyone I talked to was like, dude, he's just lying. Like, there's nothing, he doesn't have anything on you. But it didn't make sense to me at all because, the people that were defending him, they were, firmly in the camp of like, oh, show us some evidence, like, don't believe victims unless evidence is there. And yet my abuser didn't have any evidence. And yet they believed him. So it didn't make sense. The math didn't add up in my head. And I thought, what did I do? Then my abuser publishes what people call the manifesto. He goes on Twitter and he publishes this entirely way too long. I don't know how many words it ended up being, but it was a very long, very disturbing thing that was from his perspective of what was going on. And once that comes out and I read it, then I fully understand that he can lie, because it's very weird. And 90% of it is just straight up lies. It's like the ramblings of a madman. Like, it makes sense in the beginning, and then slowly, it's kind of like, I would relate it to reading Catcher in the Rye, where you realize slowly that Holden Caulfield is not a reliable narrator. But in the beginning, I sort of believe what Holden is saying. But then it becomes more and more insane. It's like Catcher in the Rye on steroids. In it, he says that he became Jerry and I's dad, which is weird and not true at all, and also very weirdly incestuous because he was obsessed with me. But he was very much our mom, like, not dad at all. If we're going by stereotypes of gender, I actually had Freudian slips where I would call him mom, which is a whole other ballpark that I don't want to get into. But again, I think that's just his insecurity, where he was like, I can't be a mom, I'm a dad, you know? Like, even relating to a woman in any way is yucky for him. So, and in it he says a bunch of weird shit. It's just so weird. He says that he got Dash gifts and stuff, and it's like, what? No, you didn't. What does that even mean? A few people from our friend groups were still friends with my abuser, and they were trying to be friends with us both. And then apparently my abuser gave this manifesto to some of them, and they were like, hey, this is awful and mostly lies. Like, if you publish this publicly, I can't defend you anymore. This is awful. And he published it, and then they cut him off. They came to me and were like, I'm so sorry. This is insane. I thought there was still good in him, and I'm really sorry. This is really embarrassing for me. And I was like, dude, it's fine. I believed him for 9 years. You're good. And he just became crazier and crazier as time went on. Like, a mutual friend of ours responded to my tweets and tweeted something in support of me. And she said that he texted her and was like, I don't know what Jesse told you, but, and then went on this like paragraph after paragraph fucking thing. And she was obviously like, you haven't said anything to me. What is happening? And I was like, I don't know either. But that made sense with what he was saying. You know, maybe he thought that I was talking to people or telling people things. But the thing is, I didn't have to tell people anything. All I had to do was say publicly what I said, and everyone filled in the blanks on their own, because they have had horrible experiences with my abuser. But I guess when you find out that all of your friends, quote unquote, hate you, I guess it does something to your psyche, especially like a narcissist like him. He thought it had to be someone else's fault. Something he truly never got a grasp on was that making people afraid of you is not friendship. And it sucks because some people stayed friends with him even after all that, even after the manifesto, like just blinders on, being like, everything's fine. Jesse must have done something bad. This is, you know. And some people are just like that, and there's nothing we can do to change their minds, unfortunately. With all the evidence in the world, there's not, some people just aren't savable. And I had to get that mentality out of my head, because, you know, I thought, oh, if I just explain to them the situation, then it'll be fine and they'll understand. But it doesn't work like that sometimes, unfortunately. As far as they know, that reality that they exist in is reality, because my abuser will never, ever speak to them the way that he speaks to women. He will never treat them the same way that he treats women. And that's something I had to get over also, you know, being kind of a dude, bro. I could be like, oh, well, he never did anything to me. He never said anything to me about other people. And someone else has an entirely different experience with them. Some friends are still friends with him on like Facebook and stuff, just to like keep tabs on him. Like they fucking hate him, but are just want to watch out and make sure that he's not planning anything. And they told me that he posted a Facebook status, you know, I think it's months ago at this point. In it, by his language and everything, he hasn't changed. Even after all that, even with a year to like become something of a good person, he hasn't changed. He's still in this victim mindset that people did something bad to him, and that's why he's being punished for something. It was just a big like, oh, woe is me kind of like thing, and people were disturbed by it, and they showed it to me, and I was like, I wish people were good. I just wish people were good. It's why I love BoJack so much, I think, is because it gave a real honest, cool look into like, hey, people can change, but, you know, slight spoilers for BoJack. BoJack does a lot of shitty things and then tries to change, and he changes for like a month or so, but then things aren't immediately better. People don't immediately trust him again, and then he gets mad and shitty again. And that's you know, BoJack handles it a lot better than my abuser. But and isn't that funny that I trust an alcoholic abuser horse more than a real life abuser? I trust BoJack to change more than I trust my abuser to change, because he's proven time and time again that he can't and he won't. This shouldn't have to be said, but I just want to say it just in case, because we're wrapping up now. Please don't go after him. He's done. I don't even know if he even checks his social media anymore, you know. If he's still using it to stalk people, then like he probably is, but I don't want anyone to go after him, because that just kind of like gives him validation and gives him power, you know what I mean? Like, he's done, just don't even bother. I've made my peace with it. I've become such a healthy and happier person without him in my life. I'm going to therapy, I'm going to group therapy, I'm going to everything. I'm fantastic. I'm still dealing with a lot of like PTSD stuff from it, but I'm healing at my own pace, and life is so much better for me now, infinitely better. I wake up every day grateful that I don't have to deal with him anymore. Like, just a fucking weight off my shoulders. A lot of my health conditions that were triggered by stress are gone now because, because I'm not dealing with the dark cloud over my head every day. And he's taught me a lot about trusting people, and that like, hey, some people can't change. Some people won't. I used to trust everyone, and now I don't, because I have to protect myself. I believe that everyone has the potential to change and become a better person, but they have to prove it to you in some way, even in a little way, something. If someone gives you 9 years and you can't change even a little, and you get worse, then you're no good, man. That sucks. Therapists have told me that was like the thing that needed to happen. Me leaving, I mean. Because every time that I wanted to leave, he would scream and cry. And like a kid, with a toy, if they scream and cry and you give them back the toy, there's no real consequences to their actions. My abuser never actually lost me. So now that I finally left, there were real consequences to his actions. So I think that's a good place to end part 1 on trauma, which is the history. So now that you know a little bit about my background and my history with trauma and PTSD, we can let the healing commence. I'm sorry, I know this was probably a very difficult video for y'all to watch, but hopefully part 2 will be a little shorter and a little less grim. I'll see you next video.